In the fall of 2014, many pro-democracy protests sprouted in Hong Kong to fight for the desire to have freedom to elect their own officials apart from the Chinese Communist Party's influence. These protests were supported mainly by young and intellectual activists. The protests were met with great opposition by the government and other important officials. The police force was sent into the rowdy crowds and used various techniques in order to break apart the groups of protesters. One main use of force was tear gas. However, the young people fighting for democracy did not flee from the scenes and abandon their goals for democracy. Rather, they brought umbrellas to protect them from the gas. The protests in Hong Kong were then dubbed the Umbrella Revolution because of the swarms of people that stood against the police holding up umbrellas. These protests were a huge leap in the fight for democracy in Hong Kong, as they raised awareness for many people about the power that the ruling party of the Chinese Communists exert over Hong Kong. The Umbrella Revolution stands as a direct defiance of the people to show that the Chinese are oppressive rulers rather than benevolent or supportive.
他们那个权力者，他们的就可以随意报道，我们老百姓的东西就不能报道，要给他审查，全部把那些该报道的全部给他删掉。
In early January of 2013, a group of educated Chinese intellectuals gathered outside a major newspaper firm in order to protest against the harsh censorship that the Communist Party has implemented over the years. This type of protest was extremely rare because people were directly opposing the actions of the party. Protesters demanded the censorship of media to be lessened in order for people to voice their opinions without government intervention and citizen punishment. The government responded by stating, regardless of whether these people are willing or unwilling, common sense says, in China's current social-political reality, there cannot be the kind of free media that these people hope in their hearts for. Chinese media is strictly maintained so that all news involving politics is censored and regulated. In December of 2011, the Russian Kremlin was faced with the largest protest against the leadership of Vladimir Putin since his presidential election in 1999. The protest united communists, nationalists, and liberals against united Russia and the monopoly of power that Putin holds. The protest was brought forth to take a stand against Putin's highly centralized policies and actions within the Russian presidency. The large protest was approximately 25,000 people strong, which then in turn spurred smaller protests to erupt across Russia with 3,000 in Tomsk and 7,000 in St. Petersburg. The Russian government acted swiftly against these protests by imprisoning hundreds of protesters. The government denounced the motives of the protests by working to ease public tension and controlling the spread of news and media involving the protests. – 2014 was a booming year for Russian foreign policy. A huge factor of 2014 was Russia's involvement in Ukraine and the disagreements and inevitable fighting that ensued. The actions of the Russian military and Russian officials were received with great criticism from many world power countries, including the United States. Furthermore, the actions in Ukraine also brought forth vast resentment by the Russian people who in return protested. Approximately 26,000 people gathered in Moscow in late September to protest Russia's involvement in Ukraine. The people were upset about the deaths of Russian soldiers in Ukraine, while others were protesting purely for peace. The government acted in a subtle manner by having police confiscate the signs of the protesters and having them scare the people out. Russian policy towards Ukraine did not change as a result of this protest. Protests have existed since the origins of the first societies, whether it is a Catalan protesting the authority of Cicero in ancient Rome, or Russians citizens protesting the power of Putin today. Protests all aim to better society and the livelihood of people. Protests allow for people to express their own opinions in a well-respected manner. Oftentimes, however, protests end up doing more harm than good, and thus they are coined with a negative connotation. As for Russia and China protest comparatively, both governments did not seek to change any of their policies to appeal to the people. Rather, they remained hard-headed and continued to implement policies in favor of their own agenda.
I'm on the pursuit of happiness, and I know everything that's shine ain't always gonna be gold. Hey, I'll be fine once I get it, yeah. I'll be good